I want to say that actually I think it went very well. There was the fact that we met and I came to Korea a year ago. So I saw the space and we could project in the space together. I think played a role in like helping, projecting in the space, even if I'm not there. Also, I think you did a really good job also at preparing, maps and doing like different proposition. And I feel like also I could trust you on a lot of the decision, because I think this is really the key element. If you're not there to install the work, you can trust your own feeling as an artist because you know how the work functions, but you also need to trust the person who's there, because experiencing the space in real with a real body is always a different experience. So that's also why I think it worked very well, because we talked a lot, and so I feel like you knew what I wanted, and so I feel like I could really trust you on a lot of like positioning. And having different apps also help. I feel like it was nice that we can sometimes make decision with emails, and sometimes when something is really speedy on WhatsApp, because we also had the time difference against us. That when I wake up in the morning, I was already seeing your name, and I was like, oh la la, I have to, I have to answer Heehyun. I was always like trying to drop my baby to somebody. It's like I have to Heehyun. Here's my baby. Yeah. I think for me, I honestly I feel I could work like that. As long I think if there is one visit, and it can be before, but I think one visit to know the place and to meet the people in real life is necessary. But I think that really also thinking about climate change and all the economical struggle that artists and institutions are facing, I think that could also be a way to reduce pollution, and the cost a little bit is also to try to limit the number of like back and forth and visits, and try to work as much as we can with preparing things in advance, but things can happen also without the artist. I just feel a bit sad. I wish I could have met the people visiting the exhibition, or the journalists, because it's always nice to see the reaction and to be able to have those conversations on one place. But from my point of view, I'm very happy with the way the exhibition looks, and I really don't have any regrets or anything that I feel I would have done differently if I had been there. Yes, it's something I started 2016. I did an exhibition called Monday. It was in Rome, and it was an exhibition that was addressing the idea of melancholia, but also the role that melancholia and depression plays in the big project, the grandiose project, the idea of like the ambitious project. So I was very inspired by literature, actually. James Joyce and Marcel Proust. Marcel Proust lamenting that he's never going to be a writer, and actually his own story of lamenting how he thinks he never will be able to achieve his big masterwork becomes the masterwork itself. And I was also interested how he's always sick and has trouble getting out of bed. James Joyce also working for bed. And I thought there was something interesting to explore about the sort of like refusal to comply to the work dynamic that is imposed on us by society, and how this posture can also be creative and can be an opportunity for creativity and even for really ambitious project, actually. But they feed on each other. The ambitious project is sometimes an excuse to also not do it, but then not doing it becomes the ambitious project. And the ways these two interact in a way that is almost perverse is very interesting to me. And it became the topic of this exhibition. Then I felt like I could extend this thinking to the other day of the week, because I realized that every day of the week is connected to a planet. At least in Latin language, it's very clear. In French, Italian, and Spanish, for example, lunedì, lundi, Monday is the day of the moon, the day of la lune, lunedì, and Tuesday, which is mardi in French, and martedì in Italian is the day of March. And Wednesday is the day of mercredi in French is Mercure, Thursday is Jupiter, Friday is Venus, Saturday is Saturn, and Sunday is the Sun. So there is a cosmological narrative behind the days of the week. But each of these planets, as you know, with the horoscope, but also with traditional mythology, is connected with a sort of like field of meaning. Tuesday being war, sexuality, polarization, binary dynamics, and Wednesday being communication, words, tricks, exchange, play, Thursday being wealth, abundance, Friday it's love, and is one of the most interesting one, and it's actually the one that became the first at the exhibition at Palais de Tokyo, which was using that structure in 2017, because Saturday is the day of change. And actually, it's interesting because it is the pivotal element in the week. Actually, week also means twist. It means a turn. And Saturday is that turn because Saturn represents this precisely, the idea of turn, of change. Is also kind of a dark force, ambivalent because it's connected with chronos, and also with the idea of, like, of course, a sort of abusive father eating its own child. So there is all those different narrative behind Saturday that I felt was interesting. And then obviously Saturday is also the day of the Sabbath, and it's also the day that plays a religious role, mostly for Jewish people, but also for Christians. Yes, for me, I felt like when I started this research on the day of the week in 2016, I was really intrigued by how global, this system was, and it's not questioned. So I was interested in also why, it's not questioned, and what role colonization played within the establishing of that structure, and also how did it incorporate specific kind of locals meaning. This is quite fascinating. It's a very complex topic. I won't be able to talk too much about it, but I noticed that it's interesting how in the fabrication of that rhythm, like 7 day, and the different meaning attributed to each day, there is different actually folklore and different culture that played a role in, like, establishing the name of the day in English, for example. So it combined Greek and Roman and also Nordic mythology in order to kind of like fit what used to be the system of measuring time before. But then also I feel like it's interesting to see how like this also became a sort of like instrument of power, like for the Anglo-Saxon empire, but also then also to capitalist structure to export and decide on a sort of like common rhythm. I mean, it's connected, of course, also to the Greenwich Meridian too, and that's why in the film Saturday I choose Tonga as a location, because it's a place where the Saturday is celebrated on Sunday, because they disagree with how they've been placed in terms of like time difference. They think they should be part of the same zone as Tahiti, which actually makes sense from a geographical point of view, but because, you know, of the conflict between the French and the British, and the British wanted Tonga to be included in theirs. In the Australian New Zealand Commonwealth zone. So then they became part of this time schedule. Well, but it doesn't make sense because they are closer to, you know, Polynesia. So it's interesting also to see how you pull a string and then everything comes with it. And that's something I thought was really interesting. And now the new media, which is also a product of a certain ideology, because we all use it and we believe it's just a technology, but it's not. It's a technology that has been built with within a certain cultural context, which is America, and with a certain ideology, which is actually Puritan, and the ideology of transparency comes from Christianism. And so I feel like it was interested for me to kind of like reveal and address the heritage of this religion ideology in also, you know, new media. And one way to do it was through a religious group, and to show how this religious group also use this new media, and how the adequation between the new media and the contemporary values that are being circulated on the new media, like fitness and like the community friendship, are somehow modeled by religion too. It was a bit parallel and a coincidence. I started to research the Seventh-day Adventists in 2010, so quite a long time ago, because I came across a community of Seventh-day Adventists in Vanuatu when I visited there, and I made a film there in 2010. And then I started a conversation with anthropologists who study the Seventh-day Adventists, and I got really fascinated. And parallel to that, and but a bit later, actually, while I was working on Tuesday, the group of work for Tuesday, the first iteration of it in Vienna, I started to read Ernst Bloch, and I was really like, it really made sense for me to connect the two, because the concept of hope is very crucial and very central for the Seventh-day Adventists, and the exploration of the concept of hope of Bloch carry somehow like, you know, similar idea, but also opposite idea, obviously, because he's more like a Marxist revolutionary point of view. But it's interesting also to see how it connects, because there is, of course, a partial connection between the two ideology. You know, the idea of like the expectation of a total change. The revolution is also the expectation of the Christian, which is the Messiah, and, you know, a total a radical change of society. So for me, it was interesting to connect the two. Yeah, it's a good question. I love to do research, but I don't necessarily need to integrate it fully into the film, because I want the film seems to be experienced as a sort of like fluid and not codified, experience. So that's why often, in a way, the longer I research and the more I'm free with the images, in a way, it's a bit, like the martial art, the more you master, the less you need to move. And I feel like the working on Saturday was super interesting because I had a lot of time actually to research. I was also helped. I work with an anthropologist who studied digital anthropology. He specialized in digital anthropology. And so it was actually super interesting doing this research. And in the film, all the study we did on the digital media of the Seventh-day Adventists is actually not so present. I integrated it only with the images of the website, and you have the insect that are attracted by the light of the screen and are gravitating around the screen. Which is more like a sort of like image of the digital sphere has integrated us all, has attracted us all like little insects. We're all caught in this big net. But apart from that, it's not so present. But it inspired, for example, the presence of the food ads, the fake food ads, because I directed them, and all the images of like well-being, people playing volleyball on the volleyball on the beach, and all those images were very much inspired by ideas and ideology, that I would perceive from the digital media, and not only actually the Seventh-day Adventists, but generally the evolution of digital media and how they carry a certain ideology and a certain number of like I don't know how to say, but diktat, or like requests, like they expect from us a certain behavior, and I wanted to make images of that. Yeah, it's something I really like to play with this, with the authorship of the images, and especially for this film, because I shot in 3D and I really wanted to imitate the really sleek corporate way images are made, because in a way it's also the topic of the film, how images are made and what they are supposed to lead you to believe. I mean, the whole film is about belief and the role image play in producing belief. So, so I was interested to really imitate a type of images that is not really my own, but more the way they make images, the Seventh-day Adventists, which is itself a sort of imitation of the corporate America way to make images. So I shot most of the images except the image of the big wave surfing. The big wave surfing images and underwater images is found footage. It's footage I bought from director of photography who are specialized in big wave surfing, because I'm not I'm not a specialist of this. I was really too complicated to find the right condition to shoot those images. But all the other images are shot by me. And a team, of course. But we shot like the ad for food and the TV show and the telephone, calling center, the images at the office of the Seventh-day Adventist, and the images of the surgical operation. So the image of inside the body, the stomach pill, is shot by the by Jill. I don't know. It's actually an interesting question whether a camera peel, whether you can claim the authorship of a camera peel is interesting to think about. It transformed the film completely, I have to say, because even though everything was planned very well for like 5 years, and this thematic of like food and digestion and religion and the day of the week and digital media transparency connected with religion, all this was already there when I started to film. But then Trump got elected and the whole world became so anxious and everybody was so worried. And there was also, I want to say, some kind of despair. I mean, from most people I know, people who live in the US. And so, because his program was obviously destroying everything, I mean, it was so far the opposite of what we would want for the world, that it was difficult to actually have hope, and then hope itself become what you want to reach. So it becomes a key concept, it felt, because when you have to go through a very difficult moment, because we all knew that we would have 5 years of Donald Trump president, then you need to project into the possibility that this might end. So that's where hope comes into play, that you need to believe that the present is not going to be the future, basically. And so I started to work more around this idea of like also the positive value of hope, and in a way how also religion share property with social protests, social unrest. And then it was also interesting to use the news, because as I was filming the images, I received the news, and the news were so bad because it wasn't just Trump, it was also like the way the whole ecological catastrophe was, looming at our perspective, and the different, like the sort of like regression also for the right of women, not only in America, but I want to say in like many other countries too, that has been happening the past 10 years. And so I felt like, for me, I had my own emotion to deal with, of like anger and despair, and I wanted to integrate the news into the images because of that. So the idea of integrating the news in as the news sticker in the images really came from the accumulation of bad news of that year. And a sort of like feeling of global anxiety connected with the news, with reading the news. It did feel like the news were penetrating our lives and affecting our life in such a deep way. And that inspired the idea of using the 3D and the idea of like having the news sticker really like going into the images and around the character or behind them. The idea that the news are not at the surface of our life anymore. They're really penetrating our lives. And in a way also the idea that the integrity of the body is at threat, is in danger. It's also something that is connected with that through the images of the syringe or the camera peel. The body isn't protected anymore from the interference with the public life. It's I mean, I feel the camera peel is the most obvious image of that, where you see the way it's integrated in the film. It comes very much in connection with also the image of the globe, and also images of like prayer, and that's also a bit like the sort of ambivalence, because the digestion is an ambivalent image. It's positive and it's negative, because it's processing, but it's also a sort of destruction, and it's also a way to make something that is not yours belong to you. It's a form of cannibalism. And so it was really also a good image of the way, Christian religion played a role around the world, and in colonization as well, and incorporated cultural elements that didn't belong to them, but also kind of transformed locally the culture. And so it felt like there was many different layers that could where this metaphor was relevant. And this is the most, but there's also the sort of like primary meaning of James Joyce's quote, which would be the idea that through religion, we can digest, we can accept bad news, we can overcome very difficult events, which is also an ambivalent idea, because it can be positive, meaning like it helps you survive a difficult situation, but also negative because it kills the potential for a reaction. And instead of doing the revolution, you would just pray and submit to a situation. You know what I mean? So that's where this whole concept of digestion was very interesting in relationship with hope and with the expectation of social change, because it would really like be able to carry all the different ambivalence of this. Yeah, it's actually a very interesting question. When I thought about the film and to integrating the new stickers, I mean, because we presented the film in France for the first time. And in France, also people, I mean, they speak English, most of them, but not everybody. And they also don't like, actually, when they don't like to be confronted with English words, and they like it even less if it comes from a French artist who's supposed to not use English sentences. So I was a bit conflicted because I I was wondering if we should subtitle also the news text in French, or if I should do a version with the text in French. But it was really too complicated technically to change it, because of each language has a different number of words to say the same thing, and English is so compact. In a few words, a situation can be described. And actually, it's also one of the reasons of my fascination for these news stickers, because I discovered them in New York in the cab. You have CBS News stickers, and sometimes I wouldn't understand what it means because it's so compressed. It's like pigeon killed, police fire, overcome. Like you just like you don't understand because it's so summarized and synthesized that in the end it becomes some kind of poetic, almost automatic poetic writing. And so in a way, my use of the new sticker is the one of a foreigner, and my fascination for it is a foreigner fascination for this new sticker. So translating it in a language wouldn't make sense, because I experienced it as a foreigner and I became interested in it because of that mystery, or because of how weird it sounded to me. And so it was more, I just say, I don't know how to say, but it was more respectful of the idea of the film to not translate it and to keep it in English. Also because it's a very typical American way of presenting news, and and the film was also addressing, you know, corporate America and American factory of images and belief. And so it felt like it was important to keep it in English, even though it carries this expectation that English is the global language, and it's an imperialist situation that I also am annoyed at as well. But I don't want to erase this annoyance and to pretend it's different, because this is the world we live. Yeah, it's really, I want, Tuesday I thought would look really good at Sonje when you proposed the idea of showing this group of work. I thought it was such a good idea, because I feel the configuration of the space being a sort of like half circle, and having a bit of daylight, but also the grid as a ceiling was really matching the aesthetic of the work. So yeah, for me it's super nice to see it in different spaces. It's a very cosmological work in a way that it can be recombined in so many different ways. It's all, in a way, it's also what the work is about, you know, combination and the change of combination, because the bodies are like constantly changing the ways they interact, and so it's nice also that the space and the sculpture can also have that same, you know, like changing and moving dynamic. So Tuesday is a film that combines different type of images, but they have a sort of partial connection. They are both images of training, and they are images of competition, training for competition. I was interested in the idea that, you know, Tuesday comes from Mars, the god of war, which is also the god of competition and play, and sexuality as well. And I thought that there was something, I really like when things looks too obvious, and when they, you know, they are almost cliche. I feel like when things are very cliche and banal, there's always something to dig, and something to you know, something that is being hidden. And with the images of the men fighting, I thought that it was really interesting how it could also, you know, be images of like the way gender dynamics are changing, but also how you know, the idea of domination and passivity, how those two concepts were actually like more imbricated into each other than what they seem. Because in jiu-jitsu, sometimes position of submission become position of attack. And so there is the whole possibility of reversal that is kind of like integrated into the idea of submission and passivity, that I thought was really interesting. And this is a bit how the film is made, in a way playing with very down to earth and very immediate and elementary type of emotion. You know, the fight, and like the horse race is really like who's running the fastest, and the fight in jiu-jitsu is like who's the strongest. And so the narrative is being reduced to something really, really thin and really, really elementary. And this to me was very interesting, because I felt it was related to an idea of cinema and image making that I read in Laura Mulvey. She's a feminist cinema theorist, and when she writes about the idea that cinema is based on the idea of making sugar for the eyes, and how like pleasure and sexual excitation plays a role in the way images are made. And I thought that from a woman point of view, it was also interesting to work with that theory and have my own gaze on those images that are more often associated to sort of like a masculine word. It's because it's a bit I don't want to say random or serendipitous. It's I met while I was working on the show in Rome. I met somebody who was a fighter, a Polish fighter who was traveling, and he is somebody who really wanted to be introduced to our art practice, and now he works as an artist. He's been traveling also to Korea and to a lot of different places. And he was interested to learn more about my work, what I would do. But then I also was very interested to understand about jiu-jitsu. And when he left New York, he asked me to film his last training session for his friends. And I did it as a, as a friend. But while I was doing it, I realized that I would really like to do those images again for a project of mine. And that's how it came about. So it's a bit serendipitous. But the thing about jiu-jitsu that really fascinated me is that it's kind of slow. And it looks like, because they are grappling each other, they look a bit like, insects. And it's just like really like the movement are not like you would say like judo or other martial arts. You see the leg, and then there is and then somebody fall. It's very a bit like in the action movie. There is really something spectacular. But with jiu-jitsu, the body are so entangled that there is very little movement, and this to me was very interesting because it did feel like sculpture right from the start, even though they are living bodies and moving bodies, but it looks like they tend towards a total immobility. So they tend towards a sculpture, but they are accomplishing that as force, with the force of somebody against the force of each other. And so the quality of this immobility is the quality of two forces going against each other. And this is how they become still. And this is super interesting because it's not like that or like this, like boxing. It's just like, and then they don't move. And this is the end. And so it was quite fascinating for me that in a way, the sport was intention towards not moving, towards immobility. Yeah. It's very difficult to understand what's going on for somebody who's not trained in jiu-jitsu wouldn't understand who's about to win and who's being submitted, because it's so kind of, they are so entangled. And it's so, even sometimes while I was editing the film, I realized that one of the characters was actually really suffocating and in trouble, but I didn't see that while I was filming, because it's just like really difficult to understand what's going on. Sometimes the one that is on top of the other is actually like in trouble, and because the other one with the legs, this like lobster position is kind of like holding his neck, and then it's really, really interesting and fascinating how mysterious the situation of jiu-jitsu is. For the soundtrack of Tuesday, I was really interested in having something very sensual and very contemplative, but I was also very inspired by the idea of, so Tuesday is also very inspired by Deleuze writing on the introduction of the Venus in Fur, so about sadomasochism. And I was very interested in the idea that in masochism specifically, language plays a very important role, and it's like the pleasure is taken not so much into the action happening, but into enunciating what is about to happen. And so then the word become the action. And so I thought it was really interesting to do a soundtrack where words almost cannot be said, like they cannot like be formulated. So, you know, it's constantly about to begin, but it's never beginning. And in a way, it goes with this idea of like doing a film that has a sort of very minimal narrative where like almost nothing is happening and everything stays suspended. The same way the soundtrack is constantly, you know, looping and into the idea of like it's going to begin, but it's not. And so there is some kind of like play also with pleasure and frustration, and in a way sort of like pleasure taken in the frustration, in the thing that is not happening, but you expect it would. And we did the soundtrack with the musician Joachim Boisis, which has been working on most of the soundtracks of my films. And the voice is the voice of a multimedia artist named Akwete Orakatete. He's an artist who also collaborated with me on Grosse Fatigue. So his voice is the narrator voice on Grosse Fatigue. So we work together in the studio and to like exploring all the different you know, which are also very you know, typical ingredient for you know, used in like soul music, but also hip hop, but also like different styles of music have been using this exclamation as a sort of like musical punctuation. But it was interesting to make a sort of song where it's only that and nothing else. But there is something with the film that is a bit an invitation for laziness, also for, you know, immobility, because it's also the idea that this action leads to this sort of like exhaustion, like state of like passivity. So I wanted the audience to experience a comfortable position while watching the film, and also this. I like also the idea that the exhibition itself is like a playground. And when I first installed Tuesday at Palais de Tokyo, the fact that the music was quite loud and there was a lot of mats, it was interesting to see that people who came to visit the exhibition, when they were, not everybody would remove his shoes, or it was interesting to see who wanted to be on the map and who, you know, would just prefer to look at it and not participate. And whoever was starting to be on the mat, they would stay there for a long time. And sometimes there was like teenagers who were like recovering from a party, staying there and like just like sleeping. And there was like kids, you know, falling and jumping. And I like this idea that when you make an exhibition, it's a public space, and I like the idea that there is things that I don't really control, and it's, even though the work out there and they have their own history and presence, but in the space and in the way people interact with them, there's an openness and a sort of like possibility of play and appropriation, and this is something I always, especially with sculpture, I think it's super important. For me, one of the interests of making sculpture is that sculpture are like giant toys, or like they are forming some kind of playgrounds, and they operate in this level that is beyond words, beyond speech, that is tactile. And so I like the possibility that my object can be experienced in a sensory manner. It began in actually shortly after I had my first child. Even though I feel like I'm not sure I want to say that, because the way women's work get reduced so often to their biography, and it becomes then the only explanation, and it's considered anecdotal, because of the patriarchal society we live in. The experience that is specifically feminine is devalued, and so I realized that often actually I would prefer not to say that I had a child, but it also sounds ridiculous not to say that I had a child, because of course it informed that group of work. But in a way, I think the work is as influenced by the experience of being a parent as it is also influenced by my projection into what the child think, and also maybe a form of regression into my own, memory as a child. And so that's why the series System of Attachment is a series that, I mean, it has one name, but there's many different direction in this series, because some of the drawings in the show you see are also about like violence between children themselves. There is also images of the show that relate to this form of like cannibalism of the mother. There is images that relate to more sort of like invasion of the baby into the body of the mother. So there is a bit of this. I'm interested in a way there is a sort of like cross-contamination between the mother and the child, and they form a unit that is made of two beings, but is a unit still, and will be maybe for such a long time in our life. The question whether we ever fully detach from our mother is actually still a question. And for me, it was really interesting to also use the meditation on motherhood to explore a concept around language, because the way words come to us, it's to formulate needs, and so it also comes from the absence of the mother. And this is, I read a lot of like text about that, and also about the sensory experience of speaking with the tongue and the teeth, and what it comes from, and how it's also kind of like connected to our experience to objects. And before we can speak, we can hold things, and before we can speak, we can put object in our mouth, and what the object in our mouth, we understand the object. The word comprehend also come from this idea of like putting something in your hand, but in a way, for in many language, understanding also come from the idea of like putting something inside your body, and a certain form of penetration, or digestion, or cannibalism, if I say so. To understand something, you make it yours. It become you. When I say I understand what you say, it's your words are integrating, like are becoming part of my feeling and my emotion. It's also the way empathy function. And so this whole concept of like empathy, word making and word construction, and like the kind of like physical experience of symbiosis, but also the dark part of it, because there's obviously a sort of like very scary part in the experience of being a parent, but also in the experience of being a child. And the drawings are about all of this. Yes, it's because the titles, the true story about this title is that I made the titles before I made the drawings. So because when I had my child, I couldn't draw, because first I had a really difficult birth, and then I was breastfeeding. It took me a while to recover physically. And while I was in bed, I had all this like words association, sometimes a bit negative because, you know, of course, I was still in the process of, you know, recovering and like the trauma of everything. And so before I could draw, I could write. So I was writing those words and it almost become like a text. At some point, I would like to publish actually my list of titles because they are almost like a poem in itself. And then when I see them, I make drawings inspired by those concepts because to me the title relate to certain ideas and situation. But at the moment where I make the drawings, I'm in a very different mood or like emotional state. But I connect with that emotional state, but with distance, you know. So that's why also to be honest, the experience of drawing for me is pleasure. It's like pure pleasure. It's maybe the only moment where I fully feel comfortable in my life is when I draw. And so they have always a sort of like positive energy, even though they are dealing with trauma and depression and like difficult situation, but they are somehow a sort of like an attempt to control those experiences and those emotions. I like the principle for each day is something that came from a book. You know, I found a book in a very old library that was an exploration of the planet connection with the day, and also it was kind of like telling you, okay, if you have a money conversation, it's better you have this conversation on Thursday because Thursday is the day of Jupiter. Jupiter is the god which helps for fortune and luck. And if you have to talk to somebody who's more powerful than you should talk to this person on Thursday. If you have a love appointment and meeting, you should do it on Friday because it's the day of Venus and it's a favorable day for love encounter. And you know, and creativity is at the highest on Monday because it's the day of the moon, and you know, and so and so. But I found that actually because of the destruction of our tranquility uh, generated by social media and emails and the intrusion of the external world into our routines of life, it's very important to protect ourselves a little bit. And so I thought that maybe we could use this week's, you know, this routine of the day of the week that has been, you know, imposed on us as a burden, if we could use it to resist this new burden of the digital technology invading our life, that could maybe, you know, be a way. So I thought maybe Monday is the day where I don't connect to internet and I don't answer emails. And I can read, I can draw, and everybody knows that I cannot be reached on that day. And so this is something I started to build to protect my own tranquility. But it's true, it's very difficult because people are really resisting it. Everybody is still trying to, you know, like some people, the more they understand you want to protect yourself, the more they want to invade you at that moment too. So it's been difficult to protect that space, but I tried to do it, and it was also a way to make decision more easily. So I said, okay, Wednesday is the day for social life and politics. So the activist work, and when I have to meet friends and stuff like that, I do on Wednesday. Tuesday is the day to resolve conflict. So it's the day where you have the most energy to fight. So if I have difficult conversation, I'm going to have those difficult conversations on Tuesday. And this way I don't have to think about it on another day. This way I can say, okay, I don't have to think about it. I'm going to deal with it on Tuesday. And so this is also because I'm an artist and I don't have a boss, I don't have a routine. So I needed also to kind of like create a sort of like routine for myself. And then I found a lot of virtue in creating this routine. I really like when I have a system that helps me make decisions, because otherwise I'm overwhelmed by all the possibilities. And so that's why I really like to use that system. And in general, I really like to rely on other systems to make decisions.